Welcome to another edition of EJH British Cars. And today we're going to get started on the transmission. So as you can see, I drug it out of the old shed and I spent some time yesterday just getting it clean on the outside so it will be less messy to play with now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the overdrive, which is this portion, off of the main body. If you notice, there's two longer studs here, and that's so the clutches are under a lot of spring tension, and this is where that spring tension is taken up. So you can take the short ones out, but you need to back these off slowly until the tension is relieved, and then you can remove the overdrive. In order to get the overdrive off, we're going to take this top cover off. This is where the shifter goes in. These are the switches for the overdrive cutouts. So if you have a non-overdrive transmission, these holes won't even be drilled out. So there's just a series of 9/16 bolts holding this all together. And I'll take that back, they're 1/2 inch. It will also give us the opportunity, this is the ground wire for the overdrive. We will keep this harness. It's not in great shape, but if nothing else, it'll be a good template to build another one. So this transmission came out of a TR6. As you can see, it's an A-type overdrive. I have no idea the condition. It was out of the car when we got it. Came with a bunch of other parts. Assumably, it still turns, so hopefully it still works. As long as it's not grenaded, it should be fine. So that's the top cover. These are the shift forks. That's the reverse fork. Still got oil in it. Don't see anything terribly beat up. What I like to do is to put the fasteners back into the parts that they came off of. Just makes it a lot easier to figure out what goes where when you go to put all this back together. Okay, so I've gotten the short bolts undone on this, so all that's left is the long ones. So we want to take those out, and because this thing's under a lot of tension, we want to just sort of walk this out, just do like a turn at a time on each side until the spring tension is released. The good thing is, alright, well, we got the bolts separated. Now it's just the main shaft. It's got to come out of the overdrive. And there that is. So there's all the springs. We're putting the tension on this innards of the A-type overdrive. And it looks like this bushing is not broken, so that's a good sign, because they often are. Good. Well, we'll just put that aside. Here's quick interlude. Don't forget to comment. Now the next thing I want to do is get this throw-up bearing out, and we get this clutch actuating assembly out. So there's a safety wire right there. So we need to cut that off. Safety wire. And then what it has in here, this is a special hardened taper pin that often breaks off. If your car has been abused, it's really common. So this one looks like it's broken off, as you can see. So now the real question is it broken off high enough so we'll let this rotate? Now, I got this out. So that's a diaphragm clutch type throw bearing because it's flat, whereas the TR2 has 3 arms, and then this has a rounded shape to it as it rolls across the arms. That's what the reason for it. So this is going to get a diaphragm clutch back, so we need a different throw bearing than that. So the real question is, that pin got to come out of there. So I think we'll probably have to leave that till we get all this disassembled. Yeah. This is where the input shaft seal goes right there. Of course, the gasket. And again, this is the retaining bolt for this is the overdrive adapter. And again, they're safety wired on. So we need to trim this wire out of here. And there is the adapter plate. I don't know how well you can see this, but there is a big Phillips head right there with a plate underneath it, and that's holding the reverse shaft and the counter shaft in, or the lay shaft in English. This is the thing, if somebody really beats on a transmission, and believe me, I've seen plenty of those, this is what breaks. This, oh, there you go. It's in two pieces. I can see that against my black gloves. But they either break in half, or they bend, and then these shafts move. And if the shafts move, you can have problems. So the lay shaft's got to come out to be able to pull the gears out. And it doesn't want to move. Well, there's the reverse shaft. Stand this on its nose and see if that doesn't take some pressure off the lay shaft. So surprisingly enough, this is in pretty good shape. So usually what you see is there's a lot of damage on the ends from the roller bearings. Of course, in the early cars, they were bearings just loose, and they would really eat up this. But this looks actually pretty nice. So we get the lay shaft out, the reversing shaft out. I took the snap rings off at this end. There's a big one and a small one. Small one goes on the shaft, big one goes around the bearing. And then if it's not too tight, you can wiggle this and work the input shaft out. So the gear on this is small enough to fit through the housing, whereas at a GT6 it won't. Fortunately, you're probably not going to work on a GT6. So that's the input shaft. Didn't feel too bad. And being a TR6, this has needle bearings in it. So these gears won't fit through this hole. So the the main shaft's got to go forward now that the lay shaft is down in the ground, so the gears are not connected and the input shaft is out of the way. And I probably jumped because this rear big bearing is a press fit onto the shaft, so I probably should not have taken the big ring off. I suppose the proper way to do this is to put this whole thing in a press and push on here, but it just kind of depends, and I may have to do that. But if you're lucky, this is a dead blow hammer, mind you, and I'm supporting the shaft, you can push it out of the bearing, which this is doing. So I got lucky because it's a pain putting this thing into the 20-ton press for sure. So I think that's as far as this shaft's going to go forward. What we're going to need to do now is to get the bearing out. So I'm just working underneath the edge of that snap ring with a screwdriver, and it's coming back. You could say it's a little finicky. There we go. There's the rear bearing. This is an important piece. This is a shim. You want to make sure you do not lose that, because that's fitted to this transmission. The bearing feels pretty good. Now, we get the cluster back into its collapse state. Now, here's another shim. It just fits to come out, so because you've been messing around with this, chances are the gears will have separated, and if you don't get them all shook back into their working position, there's not enough clearance to get this out. But there it is. That's the first gear synchronizer. So my best advice to you is to keep all these pieces together in the way they are. And when you're ready to take this apart, you're going to stack these in a nice clean spot. Well, I'm just wondering, there's a steel plate on the end of the lay shaft that covers it, it seals it, and there's two bolts that hold that on, and I'm just wondering if those bolts aren't sticking up just through far enough they're catching on this gear, because there's something that it definitely is running into. So I'm going to shut you off for a couple of minutes to save on the battery, and I'm going to play with that. Well, we got the lay shaft out, and it was that the thrust washer on the small end has to come out first, and for whatever reason it was wedging itself in there. You can see that there's a notch in that surface, and that's where the tab, this is the input side thrust bearing, but it's the same as the other one, only this one's bigger. So it has one tab there, so you should be able to just lift that out when all's said and done. But for whatever reason, that one was jamming itself in, and I was curious. Oh, here it is. So I don't know why. It still just has the one notch, and it's smooth all the rest of the way, but it would not come out. So if you look, I don't know how well you can see that, but there is some definite wear marks on there. So it looks like maybe that shaft dropped down at one time, and they didn't replace this bearing, and maybe it's just thicker or something. I don't know. Anyway, it took me easily 30 minutes to get it out of there, because I was trying to, not force it, but that's exactly what it took. I put the lay shaft back through, got everything lined up, and made sure that the tab on the front was lined up with the notch in the bearing, and then I pulled the lay shaft back out carefully and worked the gear cluster down, and then I could get a hold of that edge, and I pulled it up a little bit, and then I finally got the edge of the hole up past the gear, and then I could use these pliers as a little lever to pull them out, and it just kept coming out slow but sure, and I wound up using the big pry bar eventually to be able to reach in. But it's out now anyway. So I think we're good as far as that. This transmission looks like it's probably been rebuilt at some time. And I'm going to have to do something about this clutch fork. There you can just see the broken off piece in there. The problem is that is hardened steel. So whether we'll be able to, I don't know, there must be just a little bit holding it, because you can kind of rotate that shaft a bit. But we'll see, it does move. My guess is that because it's a tapered shaft, it's probably wedged in there, so it's not going to just fall out, though I will tap it a bit And of course, I have seen people that just wound up having to take a hacksaw and cutting this off, but I really hate to get rid of the original shafts because I think they're better than the replacements. And I really like this clutch fork because it has this boss on it, which you can drill out. So what you do is you loose assemble it outside of the transmission, then you drill it, and then you can put a quarter 28 grade 8 bolt in there. Just thread it in, and that really, and with the taper as well, and that really seems to cure the problem. So I suppose, if you drive gently or normally, you don't have a problem, but the problem is that these cars all got whomped to within inches of their lives at some point in time. So this is not the first shaft I've had to deal with. Anyway, so that's it for today for disassembly. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment, and we will see you on the next one.